All right. Welcome everyone to our first ever episode of Shadowrunnin on Empty, the podcast where we're going to fill your brain with Shadowrun knowledge. I am your host and lore master. So easy mode, you will know me from our awesome show Sinless, where I'm taking some of my newbie runners through the world of Shadowrun. And what better way than to get them more focused than give them a bunch of lore? I know it's what everybody wants. I've been doing Shadowrun since, wow, yeah, it's almost been 20 years. Okay. 20 years in Shadowrun and much longer than that. Don't want to date myself here. Playing tabletop role-playing games. I have with me this evening, we have Austin who plays Kaze in the show, and we have Captain Cozy who plays Zero. You guys, what are your backgrounds in the tabletop world?
My name is Austin, also known as Austin CSY. I play Kaze in the Sinless campaign that we are running on the Critical Hits channel. I have a background of D&D back to 3rd edition, was when I first started actually playing tabletop roleplay. And for the most part, pretty much all of my tabletop experience is rooted in D&D. I'm currently playing in a 5th edition campaign with my wife as Dungeon Master, with a group of friends locally, and actually playing with you guys on the channel, starting with the Worldwide Wrestling show that we did before we'd gotten into Shadowrun. It's kind of the first time that I ever branched off into playing anything outside of the D&D scape. So my experience with Shadowrun so far is the 26 episodes that we have recorded of Sinless. So yeah, I've got, I'd say maybe like 10 or so years of actual tabletop experience, but very, very new to the Shadowrun world.
Hello, everybody. I am Captain Cozy, also known as Tyler, also known as Zero, but never call me late for dinner. I've been playing Shadowrun, the game itself, since we started the Sinless run. But besides that, I played the Shadowrun game on Xbox 360, where I played a troll who teleported with a samurai sword. Never forget. Besides that, I've been playing tabletop games since the 4th edition Dungeons and Dragons. So you know I'm well versed in the RPGs. Definitely, not really. And yeah, I am a lore nerd, so I'm here for that sweet, sweet, dangerous lore.
You mentioning the Xbox 360 Shadowrun game actually reminded me, do either of you guys remember the WizKids tabletop Shadowrun that they tried to do? Where it was right after HeroClix had taken off, and they had gotten the Mech Warrior license as well. And so they started branching off into a bunch of other PC games. And one of the ones that they got the license to was for Shadowrun. But like anybody who's familiar with the click system from WizKids, you'll know that they're like tiny figures on these little rotating bases, which is why they call them clicks. But for Shadowrun, they decided that the best way to make it appealing was to make actual like 6 to 9 inch action figures that came with like full accessories, like 14 points of articulation on each of these bad boys. And they had turnable dial bases like all of the other Clicks property games, but they were massive. And it was just like a straight up PvP tactical game. And I remember having figures for that and never playing the actual tabletop version of Shadowrun. And that was I think the actual first time that I had ever heard of Shadowrun was back in that.
No one ever played that.
I don't think I to this day I have met multiple people who have the figures or had the figures and have never played the actual game.
Yeah,
yeah. It seemed to just be this is the closest we've ever gotten to cool, officially licensed Shadowrun merch, and that was the reason that everybody bought it.
So, like, the whole reason behind it was just so they could try and put out that expensive click merch. to a really niche audience at the time.
Yeah,
because there was no other cyberpunk anything on the market.
Weren't those things also like $30 to $40?
Oh, they were prohibitively expensive
like
to try to play a game with.
Like a booster pack of HeroClix was like $8, and then they're like, "Here's Shadowrun. Do you want to play?" $30 minimum introduction investment. $60 if you have a friend you want to play with. Like, yeah, it was nuts, dude. I don't know who in WizKids marketing thought that was a good idea, but ugh.
I feel like that's just WizKids marketing for you right there. But that is why it never took off. I also appreciate the 360 video game reference, Captain Cozy. I too played that. Like, had nothing to do with Shadowrun. It just had the name on it.
You could just call it a game.
It was a game, quote unquote. But
it was Shadowrun to me, damn it.
Yeah, well, you're gonna learn today.
Up until about 8 months ago, that was Shadowrun.
Well, now it's completely different. I promise you, it's nothing like that video game. The harebrained games recently that came out are actually a much better representation. And if you haven't played them, you should.
I have dipped my toes a little bit in the first one, and it is very, very good. Especially if you're into like, they very much remind me of like old school point and click text adventure games, and they are very immersive in terms of immediately dropping you in and just not explaining anything. And then as soon as somebody makes a reference to something, they're like, "Here's our little pop-up 2-paragraph dialogue box to give you a little. You want to know what a coffin motel is? Bam." You can go ahead and read our thesis on it, and then and then you can go ahead and click continue on that text box. Like,
yeah, they give you a lot of dump information. Like, whew.
They are dense, but they are very, very fun. They are very solid games.
Yes, I highly recommend them. But hopefully that's what we can get in the podcast here, is a bunch of that lore dump without having to actually read it all.
Yeah, reading's for suckers, so this is going to be a way more enjoyable reason for it. In regards to the lore aspect of it, Tyler, I'm going to need you to back me up on this one real quick. What does everybody want?
No idea.
Lore. It's lore.
Lore.
What does everybody need?
More lore.
More lore.
No, just the God. I was trying. You know what? Man. It was supposed to be an Al Snow reference. Throw it away. It's supposed to be an Al Snow reference that was just for Tyler. It's fine. Anyway, back to you, Cozy. Or, I'm sorry, back to you, So Easy. You know what we're doing.
Fell apart right away. So the first episode here, I thought, what better way to start than actually give you, I know, a little bit of a history lesson. Let's sit down for class.
Boo.
I know, right? So Shadowrun is referred to as the sixth world, but why do we call it the sixth world? I know that's a question some people ask sometimes.
I ask myself that on a daily basis.
So the real reason behind that is that two versions of Earth, or two worlds, were before this. There was the fourth world, which was like high magic and fantasy, and that all relates to another product that the original team that put out Shadowrun, the Fastbook Corporation, wrote, called Earth Dawn, which was another role-playing game that was set in like high fantasy, and there was lots of magic and fantastical creatures and everything like that. And they tied that into the worlds that they created for their next IP, which would be Shadowrun. So the fifth world is current day. That's what we're living right now. And then once magic starts to creep back into the world, that's when the sixth world starts to come back.
Okay, so quick question here. Getting right off the bat.
That's what we want.
Why is present day referred to as the fifth world? Does that have to do anything with additioning for the games, or why did they land on fifth world as the descriptor for modern day?
So it's just the way the ebb and flow of mana goes in their overarching story. They started with fourth world in Earth Dawn, and then when mana retreated from the world, we get the fifth world, which is the mundane, which is what we're in right now.
Modern civilization. Gotcha.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like an ages scenario in the Lord of the Rings mythology, where it's broken up into first, second, third age.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay.
Absolutely. That is 100% correct.
Also, at the very beginning, when you said two worlds coming together, I cannot get the image of like an animated Shadowrun movie with Phil Collins doing the soundtrack out of my head now. And I had to speak that into existence, because if it ever
That's fair.
happens, you heard it here first, because that would be a fantastic idea.
That's right. This is where you heard it first. Somebody get on that. Let's call Phil Collins.
I'm sure Phil Collins isn't doing anything these days. What's he what? Is he got like an Oingo Boingo reunion tour to look forward to or something? Like, I'm sure he's fine. I'm sure he's raring to go.
I couldn't tell you for sure. But the sixth world isn't only just about magic. We also have that dystopian cyberpunk feel where corporations have sort of taken over. Government isn't as strong as it once was, and you end up with Shadowrunners. So to get to that point, I think to set the stage for this, we have to go back in time to the late 1990s.
Nobody remembers that.
Oh, the 90s. Come on. Let's go back to the 90s, everybody.
The millennial dark ages, as we like to refer to it. Nobody was alive back then. Nobody has any history.
History didn't begin until 2000. Everybody knows it.
Yeah, his history didn't begin until Steve Jobs walked out on that stage and introduced the iPhone.
That's when it all began.
Yep.
In the before four times.
In the before four times.
So, weirdly enough, we'll probably see some correlation to some real world events that are currently going on, which I always thought was really interesting.
All names and events and locations and likenesses legally distinct, of course.
Yes, of course. We're not trying to be conspiracy nuts here, but you draw whatever conclusions you want. So at the end of the 90s, basically at the very last 1999, we've got the situation that takes place in New York City, where a bunch of truckers and teamsters actually go on strike. Okay. Sounding familiar? So the strike goes on for a while, and it results in a bunch of food shortages in New York. So biggest city on the East Coast, and they're losing food. So what do you think happens? Riots happen.
Cannibalism. Oh, okay. Sorry. I think
no, we don't go there yet.
Cannibalism riots?
Cannibalism riots? Yes. Riot for my right to cannibalize, please and thank you.
Just regular riots.
Okay, that's fair.
So the riots are going on. People are protesting. The Teamsters and the truckers are fighting back for better wages and all that fun stuff. And tensions are rising and rising. And this corporation called Certec, which just dealt in medical and pharmaceuticals, right? They have a convoy that goes through New York that's transporting hazardous medical waste. Well, unfortunately, a bunch of the rioters think that they're food trucks. And so they get attacked.
And then a bucket spills on a boy and blinds his eyes, and that's how Daredevil was created. As well as it leaking down into the sewers and also creating the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, as we know. Yes.
Okay. Not entirely connected. True. It's all connected, everybody.
You just got to look at the bigger picture, okay?
This is quite the stretch. That's not exactly what happens. Okay, what actually happens is the team that was deployed to protect the medical waste from getting out, because you don't want terrible hazardous bio waste all over your city, ended up gunning down some of the rioters.
Like you do.
It ends up that a good portion of rioters and 15 Certec employees end up dying from this incident. And that brings it to the Supreme Court, where they're like, hey, we got to blame somebody for this. Certec, it's all your fault. And instead, Certec says, well, no, we had to defend ourselves and our property. And this opens up the first Supreme Court ruling that favors corporations and says that, well, they should have a right to defend themselves as they see fit.
Surely that's not going to set a dangerous precedent going forward. Absolutely not.
Oh, if only it didn't, but it does. The next incident that we run into that kind of cascades into these corporations starting to get more power happens only 2 years later when a little corporation called Shiawase, remember that name because it's going to come up again later on in some future podcasts, they decide to build their own nuclear power plant to run their corporation that they have set up. And they didn't go through the regulatory commission, and the US just let them do it. They're like, all right, sure. They end up getting attacked by this eco-terrorist group called Terra First. And they almost go through a meltdown because of it. And again, the US steps in and goes, hey, corporation, we're going to slap your hands. And Shiawase goes, well, no, it's not our fault. We're tied up in federal regulations and laws to be able to properly defend ourselves.
I feel like the only eco-terrorist group that have ever actually been beneficial was Captain Planet and the Planeteers. Outside of them, I don't think that we've ever had a scenario where the eco-terrorists came out on the other side and they were like, look, guys, we actually did good,
That's fair, but we don't have the Planeteers, unfortunately.
That, if the Sixth World had the Planeteers,
it would have stopped everything in its tracks.
This would be a completely different game we'd be playing.
So this again goes to the Supreme Court, and Shiawase uses the Saratech decision as a precedent for why they need to be untied from federal laws and regulations. And of course, the government, in all its wisdom, wanting to make things better for people, goes, you know what, you're probably right. That sounds like a good idea. Yeah. And so they come up with this thing called extraterritoriality, which allows these corporations to basically become small nations unto themselves.
I see.
Because nothing can go wrong here.
Community. Yes, that old chestnut.
Of course, this ends up creating giant problems.
Well, man, spoilers. We haven't got there yet.
Now the corporations can basically raise their own private armies, and they have this legal precedence to wrap themselves in to be like, well, we're just doing it to protect our assets and our people. So onward we go into the future. 2002, we have the resource rush. And this is a weird move by the US where they come in and they take millions of acres of land that were originally state and national parks. Some of them, again, were stealing Native American reservations. And that land gets turned over to these corporations because they then buy it from the seizure.
Man, it sure is a good thing that art never imitates life, right, guys?
Right, absolutely.
I know, I couldn't foresee anything like this happening, right? Never in a million years.
Well, maybe just within the last 300.
So it's like we don't learn from our history. We're just doomed to repeat it.
Yeah, well,
that can't be it.
No, surely that's not the case. So they come in, start grabbing up all the land that they can.
Yep, and then selling it off to the corporations, the highest bidder, basically.
So the government is taking their own land that they have previously owned for the purposes of national parks and all of that good stuff, and are the ones who are then selling it off to the government or to the corporations that they themselves have given this right to in the first place.
Yes.
I'm starting to smell something fishy going on here. I don't know.
It's like a corporate real estate simulator.
Well, I mean, think of the lobbyists. This is probably a prime time for them.
Yeah, at the very least. Oh my God. Yeah, no, I'm starting to think that maybe somebody's getting paid under the table here, in order to allow this to happen. I know there's no such thing as corruption in politics.
It's a very nice table.
It's a very well-made table.
It's
That's
definitely made of mahogany.
yes, at the very least.
The last one. Yeah.
Interesting that you bring up the idea of corruption because in 2003, the United States government decides to dissolve the municipal government of Washington, D.C.
You know, I appreciate that it only took them a year.
Yeah. They had a lot of time to think about it.
2002, they were like, what if we just sold off all of this extra land that's just, I don't know, taking up space and we could just make the money off of it. And then the next year, they're like, why do we even need to have jobs in the first place? What if we just let these guys handle it? They seem to know what they're doing.
The hilarious reason is widespread corruption had left the city with escalating debts, crumbling infrastructure, and a climate where no one believed the government was watching out for the common good.
Shock. I am utterly shocked.
Right?
Invest in big business.
Yes,
Is
always.
Yeah, that's the major moral choice I'm making here.
Then there's a scandal with the current president about paying Mexico for resource rushes south of the border.
Mm-hmm.
Again, trying to buy up more of that land and sell it off. So they got these debts that they're trying to get
And
rid
when
of.
you're saying resource rushes, is it like extracting natural resources from that particular area?
It's that's what they put it under the precedence as, like there's natural resources to be able to be mined or gathered, but really what it is, it's like a really messed up real estate game.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think the land was more important than the actual resources that were on
Yeah.
the land.
Oh,
Yeah.
just having more land. Okay.
Yeah,
The
just
corporations,
having
yeah, the
ability to
corporations
build out.
wanted more land and places to build, especially since now they have this extra territoriality clause that they can hide behind.
Oh, so they're
Yeah.
basically expanding the size of their corporate country.
They've been
Yeah.
told you guys are allowed to be nations, and now they're building their nation
For the
within
common good.
pre-existing United
yes.
States that we already had.
Yes,
common
for the
good.
common good.
Also, why didn't we go up to Canada? What was Canada too rich for their blood? We had to go down to Mexico first, or Canada was holding out?
No, there's some things that are also going on in Canada around this time as well, where they're actually exploiting native lands as well.
What?
And pushing natives off their land for resources.
We did it
Again,
first.
thank God life doesn't imitate art. You know what I'm saying? It's just, boy, that would be a tragedy. Boy, that would be a tragedy.
I said correlations, man. It's crazy. Wouldn't it just if these mirrored real life and we were on a collision course for the Shadowrun dystopian world?
I, for one, welcome our corporate overlords.
I mean, hey, I'm still waiting for a radioactive food truck. Then I'll
Yeah.
get back to you.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
geez.
What's the radioactive waste riots happen in New York City that we are truly on the prime timeline at that point?
Well, the other thing you gotta think about is it doesn't have to happen in New York. It could be any major city, really.
That is fair. That is very fair.
I don't think
Okay,
it matters that it's New York. I feel like the story runners just pick New York because it's
Yeah, it's
a
New York.
large populous area. You see it in movies all the time.
And
Something
great place for food
disastrous
trucks.
happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So corporations move down into Mexico, start buying up all of their land as well,
Mhm.
in order to keep expanding out from there.
Right. And I'll get into what happens more around the world probably a little bit later. We're going to mostly focus on what happens to the United States and how we end up getting into Seattle as its own autonomous city kind of deal,
Gotcha.
which is what you're running in for the
Yeah.
story.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I feel like we could for sure just do like entire episodes on like the history of other places, and
Oh, it's gonna get crazy, and I'm sure you'll have you'll have questions that will expand even deeper on some of the topics that we touch on as we go through.
And I will look forward to those.
Like there's so much. There's so much. One of the other terrible things that happens, because terrible things just have to keep happening.
Right.
In 2005, the East Coast actually gets hit with an earthquake.
What magnitude are we talking here? What are we looking at?
We're looking at a 5.8.
It's not too bad. I mean, you can walk that off. That'll be all right.
Did they go into why? Like what caused it?
It's not really known why. There's an earthquake just hit Manhattan, and it's not good.
I feel like the two most logical explanations are either fracking and natural resource destruction causing some kind of shift in the ecosystem that causes this giant earthquake, or it's the awakening of the elder gods. Those are the only two viable options for
one of those
why
is
this
sexier than the other.
Absolutely, and it's fracking. Let me tell you.
Absolutely.
Ooh,
Ooh, wait.
ooh, ha! You get a little hot in here? Or is that just me?
Interesting take on one of the reasons as to why. Could come from magical reasons from back in the fourth world.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Stepping way back in time, back into the fourth world, when this menace came to kind of destroy the fourth world, everybody retreated underground using powerful magic to create these massive underground cities called cairns.
Okay.
And one of the possibilities as to why there's this earthquake is one of those cairns is destroyed.
Whoa.
Now, in reference to the timeline between fourth world, fifth world, like what is the timing in between? Is it supposed to be like year zero is the beginning of fifth world into modern history? So like as far as we have existed, we are 2,000 years removed from the fourth world.
So the fourth world really reaches all the way back into like myth and the storytelling there. The fifth world really begins in like the BC era.
Okay.
And goes all the way till now.
So the fourth world timeline is like thousands, if not tens of thousands of years that existed. And then the fourth world ends at the dawn of essentially modern civilization that we have now.
It's a weird contrast where fourth ends and begins. I will have to actually maybe look into that, but I know it's all in antiquity, and the myths all come from that we know of today in the fifth world are coming from the fourth world.
Gotcha. Okay. And within the modern context of our current timeline, the current modern civilization and history that we have had as people now, like in the real world, is the same timeline that the fifth world timeline also follows, basically up until 1999, which is when everything starts to diverge.
Yes.
Cool. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, the divergence happens in 99. Part of me just feels like we're just behind the timeline. we're ahead of the Shadowrun timeline. Shadowrun stuff happens earlier, but I don't know. There's stuff going on today that really makes me wonder sometimes.
Listen, given that I was born in 91, I will wholeheartedly sign off on everything started going downhill after 99. So I can agree with that sentiment wholeheartedly.
That's fair. Going off of all this land grab and this resource grab and everything, and corporations starting to really ramp up and become bigger things. Leave it to Texas.
Yeehaw!
In 2000, we're in 2008 now. Texas creates a new kind of militia that allows governments to assemble armed groups of private citizens to fill the gaps for law enforcement.
Are you sure you're not just reading off of Wikipedia?
I swear that's what happens.
I feel like you're just reading off of Ted Cruz's re-election campaign speech right now. Like, I think that's so. Okay, so then I have a question.
Okay.
So at this point, how is that being regulated when we've already had the dissolution of federal government?
State.
Okay, so we've just gone completely to state government. There is no federal overhead. Every state is its own autonomous entity at this point, as well as the mega corporations.
Yes, you have the remnants of the federal government, which people laugh at this point.
Right.
You've got the corporations becoming their own places, and so states are left to kind of fend for themselves.
Okay, gotcha.
Huh.
Otherwise known as the Texas wet dream. Right.
Amen, brother.
Oh, that's pretty spot on.
All right, so we've got the Yeehaw posse down in Texas.
Yes, that comes into play much later on as well, where you'll see the creation of a corporately owned police force.
Mm-hmm.
And that becomes Lone Star, the Lone Star Police Force.
Oh, that
that name makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, huh. I just thought it sounded cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it had that's its roots
Star.
right there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, that makes a lot more sense then.
We will get to that, I promise. Going forward, we're now on to 2009, and really the crazy stuff for Shadowrun, like this is all just ramping things up. The crazy stuff really starts to happen with the end of the Mayan calendar,
which was 2010, right?
12.
2012. Okay,
2012. Gotcha. So we're into 2009 now.
Sorry, we all lived through it, and I completely blanked it out of my memory. So that's my bad. All right, so 2009.
2009. The U.S. makes another boo-boo.
I don't think we're known for that.
Not in the slightest. I mean, we just started a people-run militia, so
yeah.
United Oil Industries, so you know this is going to be great, receives the oil rights to 1/4 of the remaining national parks and 1/10 of the remaining Native American reservations. This definitely creates a big problem.
But everybody loves oil
and native land.
Oh yeah, and losing native land, right?
I mean, we're repossessing native land.
Everybody loves oil and taking native land. That's what I've learned so far from the.
For legal purposes, these are all jokes.
Yes.
These are all jokes. Please.
All right, so big oil comes in, does what big oil do.
Yes, big oil come in, do what big oil do. They take the native lands, they push the natives off their land. Canada is also doing something similar at the time. And this ends up actually creating a movement with Native American people who've been displaced once again. They come together to form the Sovereign American Indian Movement, otherwise known as SAM. This also goes into the first major incident of this time, called the Lone Eagle incident, where a group of militantly minded and armed Native Americans storm a nuclear missile silo in Minnesota or Montana.
My guess would have to be Montana. It's a lot of flat nothing out there. It's a perfect place to throw nuclear silos, and literally nobody would realize. Nobody would notice it. There would
no
be
one
no
would
difference.
notice it.
It's the perfect area for it. I mean, unless they're gonna hide them in the lakes in Minnesota, at which point you could build about 1,000 nuclear silos, and once again, nobody would notice anything because they're already there. Also, I have to say, when we first started this and everything was like, yeah, we're gonna learn about the lore, it's gonna be fun, woo. People give people give The Simpsons a lot of credit for predicting the future. I don't think enough people are giving Shadowrun credit for predicting the future, because big yikes, dude. There's a lot of big yikes that we've talked about so far, and
that are close to what you think could happen, right?
oh boys, are we hitting home on a lot of topics right now that I'm like, yeah, we're about 10 years off, and that could still definitely happen tomorrow. And I
Right?
can totally see that being the case.
Yeah, I remember when I was like, man, I can't wait to like be distracted from the world and talk about some fictional lore. And then I feel like you're just reading alternate history.
I'm really sorry about that.
No, you're not. No, you're not. Okay, of the few things I will preface, of the few things I know about the Shadowrun lore, I feel like I know where this is going to end up, and I'm very excited. I just wanted to put that out there. It's one of the first things you told me about was Shadowrun, and I don't remember if this is exactly it, but I'm excited.
All right, it is Montana.
Yeah, good old Montana, finally putting it to use for something.
So they storm the place, and the government gives the green light to send in a strike team to take it back, right? And of course, this ends in like a bloodbath, but not before the natives fire a nuke.
Oh.
Yeah, they launch a nuke, and they launched it at Russia.
Oh,
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay, why did they launch it at Russia?
Because Russia, still in this timeline, is one of the other superpowers that's still a big threat against the United States, and obviously they also have a giant nuclear arsenal. So
was the intention of Sam at this point that they were just trying to go like full on glassed Earth, like
yes,
just ruin it for everybody scenario?
Yeah, yes. They're this militant group. There were at this time also there are a bunch of protests and some riots that are going on about Native Americans losing their land.
Rightfully
and this
so.
this militant group just decides we've had enough. They go in, they storm the silo, they take it over. They know that they're cornered. Negotiations are going nowhere. They're trying to get some of their land back.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously the corporations are like, no, you signed on the dotted line.
Right.
So the US government goes send in the strike team, and they knew it was coming, and so they made good on their threat of listen to our demands, we're going to glass everything.
Fair enough.
So they fire the nuke. The president at the time freaks out and tries to call up the Russian president to prevent a nuclear holocaust.
Understandably so.
And as the missile is on the way.
Yay. Hey, just a quick mention, like, scale of 1 to 10. Not a big deal, right? Like, we'll still be cool after this, right? Like, I gave you a heads up,
Yeah, that's basically what he's trying to do.
I see no reason why we can't still be friends on the other side of this whole nuke going off in a heavily populated area, I'm assuming, scenario.
Right? But here's the silver lining.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing happens.
The Death Star?
Does
the Death Star system work?
No, the missile disappears.
Oh,
you're telling me that in the world of Shadowrun, where all this insane stuff is happening, nothing happens?
Well, the aftermath.
Well, the nuke disappears. That's a pretty significant something.
He said specifically nothing happens, and then also, oh, by the way,
well, nothing happens in terms of it didn't land anywhere, but a nuke disappearing mid transcontinental flight. That's a pretty substantial happening. I'd say.
No one finds it, and no one knows what happened to it to current day where we're playing in Shadowrun. No one knows what happened.
Oh, cool. Man, we're just gonna get to this point where there's just gonna be like a blip and the nuke just reappears in trajectory, isn't it?
Oh my gosh, that would be terrible.
And then there's gonna have to be like Dragon Bruce Willis is gonna have to fly up and grab the nuke and re-trajectory it into the moon. Then we're gonna lose the moon. Catastrophic tidal damage. Oh,
Dragon Bruce Willis.
Okay.
Wow,
as-
I was
as-
not ready for that.
as Sixth World Aerosmith plays him out in a grand fashion.
Okay.
All
So
right.
wait, it just disappears out of the atmosphere, or
Yeah, it
like
vanishes
people are
off radar.
looking at? Are they? Oh, so people don't see what happened to it?
No, no one sees what happens. It just vanishes.
Oh,
No one knows what happened.
Well, that was a close one.
Yeah, everyone breathes a sigh of relief, like, no nuclear holocaust. All right.
everything's okay.
Everything, however, does not end up being okay.
Nuclear war avoided for some reason. Everybody's celebrating.
Exactly. No one knows why. But then you have the fallout of what happens. Obviously, there ends up being a lot of rage and anger directed at Native American peoples because you tried to nuclear holocaust. So, bad things happen. This isn't our brightest hour, but hey, we're joined by Canada and doing the same thing. So Canada and the US kind of get together and like, hey, we got this problem over here. I think we need to build re-education and relocation camps.
Oh no.
And they do.
Oh no.
Yeah, the Re-Education and Relocation Act is passed in the US, ordering all natives with the remotest connection to the SAM group. So if you have native blood, guess what?
Oh.
You are sent to detention centers.
Oh. I see no parallels here. Ooh.
In Canada, they call it something else. They call it the Nepean Act is passed, and that legitimizes internment camps for natives while dismantling the Inuit territory.
Well, it feels like Native Americans don't get a break in Shadowrun.
Oh, they do. Don't worry. When we get there, your jaw will probably drop. The Native Americans do get revenge. I will say that. But we have more terrible things to happen before we get to there.
A nice change of pace.
I know, right? And of course, under the guise of rounding up all of these dissenting Native Americans, the government seizes all remaining lands. Big surprise,
like you
right?
do.
Yeah.
Like you do.
No one thought anything bad was going to come of this. And at that same time, in 2010 now, a terrible disease rears its ugly head as well, as if we didn't have enough problems going on.
2010, terrible disease.
Yeah, they were only 10 years off. Cut them some slack.
Yeah.
The world is hit by a plague called virally induced toxic allergy syndrome, otherwise known as vitis.
But Vita means life. That seems counterintuitive.
It does, right? But that's what they call it.
You know,
and
you always got to appreciate a good acronym.
And I do.
This nasty little bug ends up taking out a quarter of the world's population. Yeah, it was bad.
Do they ever go further into expanding on what the cause for this actually was, or is it just this weird virus that just was a permutation of a permutation that showed up and took everybody out?
I mean, the fact that it has allergic, is that like one of the root parts of the acronym?
Allergy.
It's an allergy.
It's once again, it is called.
Yeah, it made you allergic to being alive anymore.
I guess so. A quarter of the population.
The virally induced toxic allergy syndrome.
Oh, so it's a virus that makes you allergic.
So it's a virus that makes you allergic to life.
Huh.
That's why we called it Vetus. You know what? I'm starting to get on board with this. It's starting to come together.
Things are starting to make sense in the fifth world. Fourth world?
Fifth world.
Fifth world.
Fifth world.
It was it was an airborne virus, so that's why it was so rampant.
Mm-hmm.
I just have this like smirk of someone who's like,
So if you contracted this nasty bug, it becomes evident in 12 hours after your initial exposure.
Uh-huh.
Initial symptoms include fever, chills, and vomiting.
Okay.
If unchecked, it progresses into anaphylactic shock with an increase in histamine levels causing bronchospasms, and most people die from bronchoconstriction, leading to suffocation. I don't know. That sounds pretty correlated.
as someone with asthma, that is absolutely terrifying.
As someone also with asthma, seconded. So when Vetus comes out and starts ravaging and having its way with humanity, where do we get to the point of it not being an issue anymore? Is it natural development of immunity to the virus, or is it, or do the mega corporations come in and save the day?
As they often do.
Not really. Here's what I've got for you on where it possibly came from.
Okay.
There are a bunch of rumors and conspiracies that it
Great
was
start.
a viral form biological weapon
Oh, wow.
that was
And it-
developed at a research lab in Christmas Valley, Oregon.
Oh, okay. So
Okay.
they didn't come from bats, is what you're saying.
Probably not.
Okay.
That's the conspiracy theory.
How ridiculous is that?
How ridiculous of a notion is that?
Are you ready for the next fun part?
Let's
Christmas
go.
Valley, Oregon, in current Shadowrun, is now in Tirtankari.
In what's Tirtankari?
Remember, you were doing that assassination mission on the prince from
the Tyr.
He comes from Tirtankari.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I'm gonna show my geographical ignorance here.
Yes.
Where is that? Is that a thing in world?
Yeah, in real world.
Yeah, Christmas Valley, Oregon is a
It's
place.
a real place.
Tirtankari.
It's Tirtankari in real world is Portland.
It's Portland.
Oh, it's just Portland. Okay.
Yeah. I do remember that only because So Easy did explain that to me when I was asking him some questions about the prince on the side. But yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it shows its head around 2010, 2011, and over the next 2 years, it kills a quarter of the world's population.
Oh, fantastic. Okay. And it originated from Oregon.
It maybe originated from Oregon, but the first cases weren't reported until the first cases were initially reported in New Delhi in India.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I forgot to include my air quotes there. It originally started in Oregon as the potential of being a bioweapon that was being created there, and then it showed up originally in New Delhi. Okay, gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Okay, so then that shows up, starts killing everybody.
Yep. The World Health Organization steps in, and even when medical supplies were provided, local governments withheld vaccinations from large portions of the population in order to either sell to the highest bidder or just make sure the people they wanted to survive did so.
Man, this podcast would have been so much more fun to record like 3 years ago than it is right now.
Oh, geez.
Right now, but you know, that's totally the case. Okay, so
they do make
a
vaccine.
People get to survive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they do eventually create a vaccine for it. Which stems the death toll.
Which is always a plus.
Always a plus, but it lasts for 2 years. So,
gotcha.
Oh wait, so does this continue to exist?
Technically, in our current timeline for Shadowrun, Vitus still exists.
Oh, wait. So do you have to like regularly every 2 years get a vaccination?
No.
Oh,
most people by this time are vaccinated. Are vaccinated against strain 1.
Great. Oh, I love it. Okay, so it's like so it's like polio, basically.
Yes.
Okay. Gotcha. So
Yeah, strain
so-
2 hits in 2020.
okay. Ooh, okay. So for the initial strain, so strain 1, outbreak in 2010, and then you said it was for 2 years. So
Yes.
it goes to 2012. 2012 is where we start to actually get the vaccinations out and
Yes.
into a widespread capacity. People
Mhm.
start to be okay. And then you said nothing eventful else happens in 2012, right?
Nothing at all.
Oh yeah,
Everything just moves on
everything goes completely fine.
seamlessly until 2020.
Fantastic.
No, there's definitely other stuff that happens.
Okay. So, but to loop back around as well to my initial question that I had. So the megacorps are the ones who do come out and go, "Don't worry, guys, we've got the vaccine for you."
Some megacorps do that deal in pharmaceuticals, and then there's the WHO that also comes out. It's like, hey, we've also got it.
Okay, gotcha. All right, so everything is pretty garbage from 2010 to 2012. It sounds like.
Yeah, in 2012 is really when everything starts going off the rails.
Hoy, chummers! Just wanted to take a moment and let you know about our Patreon. While we release episodes of Shadowrunnin on Empty every single week, we actually have a backlog of about 4 episodes at any given time, just to give us a little cushion in case we can't record on our schedule for whatever reason. You know, like holidays or bug spirits. If you're interested in getting access to the episodes early, as well as a bunch of other benefits like artwork for the show, news on changes or rollouts, and sneak peeks at other things coming up, 5 new yen a month over on patreon.com/critical_hits gets you full access to all of the bells and whistles. You can even get a shout out for your support at the end of every single episode of Stinless as well. So if you enjoy the podcast and you'd like to support our work as well as get tons of bonus perks, that's the best way to do it. Thanks for your time, and let's get back to the show.
In 2012, we actually see the first dragon.
Oh,
Fantastic.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
the first dragon is spotted at the end of December, December 24th or 25th.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah, at the
Dragon.
end of the year 2011, there's a bullet train that's going by Mount Fuji in Japan, right?
Uh-huh.
And Mount Fuji simultaneously erupts and a lightning storm hits it at the same time.
Metal.
Jesus Christ.
Super cool, right?
Uh-huh.
I've actually seen real life pictures of it happening, and it's wild.
That's nuts.
So this goes on, and people are watching as the bullet train goes by, and at that same time, this Japanese dragon, so one of the long, like snake-like versions,
Oh yeah.
just zooms by the bullet train.
Dope.
Yeah, people are taking pictures. They're wondering, what is this?
I mean, all of the people who were ready and excited for the second coming of Jesus, I bet none of them had their money put on dragon form. I mean, if it happened on Christmas Day,
definitely not, and especially in Japan too.
And in Japan, dude, that is a fantastic double whammy. I love it.
But not to be outdone, in January of 2012, we have one of the most interesting
January of 2012 or January of 2013?
January 2012.
Okay.
We have one of the more interesting, because it's 2011 when the first dragon is seen going into 2012.
Okay, sorry. That was mine then. I thought it was 2012 for the dragon. All right, so 2011 we see the dragon.
Yep, going right into 2012 we see the dragon.
January business as usual.
January we have one of the greatest dragons appears in the world, who we will be doing some deep dive into at a later date. He is called Dunkelzahn.
Dunkelzahn.
He appears at Cherry Creek Lake in Denver.
Okay.
The way that he's different is he immediately makes himself available to the media.
Okay, yep.
He-
You know,
He goes out and he actually does a 12-hour interview.
Nice.
okay, sick.
He's his
All
own
right.
publicist. Gotta respect the game.
Hey, man, respect the hustle.
Yeah.
Nobody makes
Um,
you look good like you know?
Word.
in that same month, there are a number of other dragons that come into the world.
Okay.
Some of them end up wreaking havoc. Some of them are a little more publicly seen, but Dunkelzahn by far is the most seen in the public eye.
Okay.
He actually ends up doing this thing that's kind of like a podcast. It's more like a talk show that he does later called Worm Talks,
Okay.
where it's almost like a late night TV show. He'll bring people on and they'll do interviews.
Fantastic. I'm loving it. I've got
It becomes very popular.
I've got a lot of respect for Dunkelzahn so far. I got to be honest. This dude sounds like he knows what's up.
I mean, a little bit of an early history lesson here since we're talking about him.
Yep.
He actually ends up being the first president of the UCAS.
Oh no,
The first
he's not
dragon-
the one who gets
the first-
assassinated, is he?
The first dragon president, and sadly,
Oh,
yes, he is the one
no.
that gets assassinated.
No, not Dunkelzahn. We just attached to each other. Oh.
But that's not until like 2050.
Oh man. All right. You know what? As long as I get a solid 38 years of Dunkelzahn, I
Yes,
think I'll be
you do.
okay. All right. That's fine.
He had a good
All
run.
All right.
Question: do they have any connection between the fourth world and the dragons?
Yes, but that is not publicly stated.
Oh, okay.
Yes, all the dragons have connections back to the fourth world.
Cool. And Dunkelzahn was in a lake.
Yeah, he comes out of Cherry Creek Lake in Denver, which I think is an actual place.
I mean, probably with how based on reality the story is.
Yeah. Why start making fake? Why start making fake locations at this point?
Right?
Apparently, Cherry Creek is actually a reservoir in Denver. Fun fact.
Ah, well, now we
Yeah.
know.
There we go.
So a lot of the dragons come out in this time through 2012, and we see a lot of other things start happening in the rest of the world too, to kind of interact with these crazy things that are happening. We've got, here we go, more corporation talk
All right. I'm ready.
in Dallas. The local corporations agreed to take control of Dallas's struggling welfare system, as long as it, of course, adheres to their rules.
Makes sense. Checks out.
And this is more how kind of the early beginnings of the Lone Star Corporation start to take root in Texas.
Everything goes down in the Lone Star State. What can I tell you?
It really does.
Yo, wait. Okay, not to jump too far ahead. Are there any dragons native to Texas?
There sadly are not. No.
Lag it all.
I'm sorry to disappoint you.
I wanted a dragon in a cowboy hat.
In 2012 is also when the first whispers of magic start to creep back into the world as well.
Is it referred to as whispers of magic?
Well, no one really knows what it is. It's just attributed a lot to strange phenomena, like people being able to levitate or vanish, things like that. No mages have emerged yet, but people that have strong ties to the land or totems, like shamans that have lived like a shamanic lifestyle, will feel this power before anybody else.
Okay.
So I don't know if that gives you some foreshadowing as to
Uh-huh.
what
Yeah,
is coming.
I could start to see where we're going with this in a good way.
Yeah.
I'm
Good
liking
in
it.
quotes for the Shadowrun verse.
One interesting tidbit is kind of just off to the side. In 2013, one of the new national sports that gained some popularity in the sixth world that I will actually go over in another podcast, combat biking gets founded, which
Now,
ends up being a big game.
Is it like what are the origins, or like what was the beginnings of combat biking? Was it just motorcycles with like a chainsaw attached, or what?
It was actually because of go gangs, because gangs are becoming more and more prevalent as time marches on and society kind of is breaking down, because you have corporations taking over more and more land and imposing their laws instead of federal or state regulated, right?
Right.
You're getting the gang to kind of grow again, like in the early 90s where we had a lot of gang issues. You see a resurgence of that because of the lacking in any kind of formal law enforcement, because you're kind of losing them as the corporations take more land. So you see the rise of the gangs more, and these go gangs are very popular, and because of this creates this combat biking league.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is it seen as like a means of calming the populace, getting out some frustrations? What?
When it's turned into a sport, it is, because then corporations see a reason to get involved where they can make money off of sponsorships and televising and building arenas and et cetera, anything where they can turn a buck. And we march right along to the next year of 2014, and this is where the natives get their revenge. And on top of that, it sets the stage to really reshape the United States as we know it today. So there's this guy who's a Native American. His name is Daniel Howling Coyote.
Sick.
He is this guy that's living in these internment camps, right, and re-education centers, and he's talking about how they as a people should come together so they can reclaim their lands. And he's been talking to his ancestors, and they're telling him that the time is coming to be able to make these demands to get their land back. So on the 10th of June, Daniel Howling Coyote, he makes a public appearance after he had escaped an internment camp. And he reveals that he spent his time building a coalition of Native American tribes called the Native American Nations. And he claims the entirety of North America for the Nan.
Hell yeah.
And demands that all people of European, Asian, and African ancestry leave the continent or face retribution.
This guy just became my favorite character in Shadowrun.
Most governments and people didn't take it seriously. They're like, who's this guy? What's he gonna do? Then in July, the Rondo volcano erupts, burying the city of Los Alamos and the Los Alamos National Laboratory under volcanic ash. Daniel Howling Coyote appears on TV again shortly after the eruption, claiming credit for the eruption and calling it the power of Mother Earth.
Nice. Very nice.
He promises that much more such events are on the horizon. Of course, the government doesn't want this, so again, they try and send troops to capture him. But a string of tornadoes hampers their advance.
Oh, I wonder where those came from. That sure seems conveniently timed.
Right? And Daniel is able to escape. His followers are long gone by the time they get there, and the tornadoes abate.
Wait, they get there and the tornadoes a what?
they disappear. Like
Oh, okay.
as soon as they
sorry.
get to the location
the
where
tornadoes dissipate. I don't. For some reason,
Yes.
my brain did not put that
I heard
together.
pain.
Yeah, and I was like, wait, the tornadoes did what? Okay, so sorry. So the tornadoes go away.
The tornadoes
Yes.
date and they find love.
uh,
at the same time he makes a statement to all Native American peoples,
mhm.
broadcasting out to them that they need to come together and join the Nan, and they're going to start this thing that's called the Great Ghost Dance to call on their ancestors
Here it is.
Dude, I just
power.
yes, do it. Everything about this is so stoked. Let's go.
So yeah, Daniel Howling Coyote convinces a lot of the Native American peoples to come together, and they start doing, unbeknownst to them, this great magic ritual that's called the Great Ghost Dance.
Sick.
And basically it's them dancing and doing this chant and everything day and night. People die from exhaustion in doing this, but it ends up paying off for them because when they do the ghost dance, it finally culminates in 2017.
It takes how long?
Is that 4 years?
About, well, like three and a
Ish.
half.
3.5. Okay. Also, if people died while they were performing the ceremony, wouldn't that just make something called the Great Ghost Dance more powerful?
It
Or am I
does.
crazy?
No, it does.
Okay.
That's the whole
Okay.
reason.
Sick. The greater good. The greater good.
For the greater good.
Yep. Here for it.
So the president doesn't want to give the lands back, right?
Uh-huh.
The
Makes
president
sense.
at the time. And so he under the table puts out this extermination
Oh
order.
no.
Real quick question. Real quick side question.
Yes.
How do we still have a president if we don't have a federal government anymore?
It's like a figurehead, like the queen type deal.
Gotcha. Okay, fantastic.
I mean, there was a president that tried to repeal and reinstate DC as a place of governance.
the federal
and
government. Mhm.
Yeah, it half worked and half did not.
Uh-huh. I'm assuming it didn't take considering where we are in the film
Right.
world at this point, but okay, so I guess that's what I was wondering. Okay,
Gotcha. So in 2017 in August,
yep.
that's where we're at.
Okay.
The military makes moves to try and exterminate Daniel and his followers.
Okay. Yep, that makes sense.
So they initiate the Great Ghost Dance. And the first thing that happens when they do it is the simultaneous explosion of 4 volcanoes in the Pacific Northwest.
Dope.
Hell yeah.
Mount Hood, Mount Rainier, Mount St. Helens, and Mount Adams all erupt at the same time.
Also, Tyler, all real places, just so you know.
I'm assuming they are until told otherwise.
Yep.
Yes.
I can verify all real mountains.
Yes, can verify. Freak weather patterns follow and continue to last the whole rest of the year.
Now, is this something that is it the Nan, right?
The Nan.
Is this something that they all knew the things that were going to happen ahead of time, or was this like
No?
Okay, so even they didn't know. They were just like, yeah, I don't know. This is just shit's gonna be crazy for the next 12 months, guys. We tried to warn you.
They were following and believing in Daniel because he was this very charismatic figure. Seeing his ability to manipulate like the weather, like those tornadoes that came out of nowhere, really led to giving him more credence to have these people follow him.
Okay, gotcha.
And so now he proves it even more with the Great Ghost Dance and the simultaneous eruption of 4 volcanoes.
Sick. Okay.
This scares the absolute dreck out of the president.
Understandably so.
He immediately stands down and comes to the negotiating table.
Okay. Well, that's good. At least something had to give, right? Like at some point given everything that's happened in the history of the Fifth World so far, I'm glad that there was finally something that happened where they went, maybe we do need to talk about this.
I think so. And that leads to the following year in 2018, they go to Denver. They meet in Denver. The NAN, the United States, Canada, and another location called Atsland, which we will get into that formation and who they are a little later. They all sign the Treaty of Denver. This gives the NAN sovereignty and is recognized, and it gets a vast majority of the Western United States, with California and Seattle as the only notable exceptions.
Dope. I mean, we've given sovereignty to literally everybody else at this point in the Fifth World. Like, this feels appropriate,
Yeah, so they get a ton of their land back.
So how does that interact with the corporations that have already settled there?
It's weird, since the corporations still have some of their land and still claim extraterritoriality. The natives take all the land around them, but for some reason, extraterritoriality still holds. So they still keep some of the lands that they have received, but they also did give some back. The corporations did also concede a little bit as well, just from what happened.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can see how much the United States lost and gets separated.
Oh, this is where we get the UCOS.
This is where the UCOS starts to form, yes. Of course, people in the United States are really upset about this. You have people that feel like they should have called Daniel's bluff and gone for it, but they didn't. And so you end up with a whole fight again between the northern United States and the southern United States, arguing about what should have been done.
Where have I heard that one before?
Right. Meanwhile, California becomes its own state.
As they've always wanted to.
Yeah, they finally do it. They just remove themselves from the rest of the United States and like, we're our own autonomous country now.
Good for them. I'm glad that they finally get that.
And then in part of the treaty with the NAN, Seattle is chosen as the only port that the UCOS has on the West Coast. So it becomes very strategically important. And Seattle becomes a mega city, like a metroplex. So instead of just Seattle as we know it today, that literally becomes what we know in the Shadowrun world with you guys as downtown.
Gotcha.
So regular Seattle City becomes downtown, and then Auburn, Puyallup, Fort Lewis, Everett, Tacoma, Auburn, Redmond, all of them get smashed together to form what becomes the Seattle Metroplex. It's seen as defense for the Metroplex. They put a big wall around it that's facing the NAN.
Around Seattle?
Around the whole Metroplex, there is a wall. So that big picture that you see of what is the Seattle Metroplex, anything that's not touching the ocean, there's a wall around it.
Oh.
That whole border.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like 10 to 15 feet tall concrete that separates the Metroplex from the NAN nation of the Salish Sheed.
Okay.
That was part of the agreement.
And our story takes place where in Seattle again?
Well, you're in the Redmond area in Seattle.
Okay. Oh, the Redmond
Yes.
Barrens.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So the next couple years after that, technology starts to finally ramp up, and we get things like cyber limbs start to become real and usable.
Interesting.
Okay.
Does this come with any like significant historical event, or just naturally technology progresses to that point?
It's naturally technology starts to
Okay.
progress to that point
Gotcha.
to make people better, basically.
Is it safe to assume that this was like technology was able to advance because the ghost walk or ghost dance finally ended?
That's up in the air. I think a lot more people would attribute it to corporations not having any oversight and doing whatever they want on their fiefdoms
Gotcha.
to just kind of progress technology however they want. Things finally start to calm down after this. We've had the Great Ghost Dance that gets the Nan their lands back. We have the Seattle Metroplex gets made. We have dragons are real in the world. So what possibly could happen next?
Probably something horrible again, given what we've talked about so far tonight.
Well, the next major thing that happens comes in 2021, where this freak accident or a freak event begins to happen all over the world, and they call it goblinization.
Okay, so this sounds metal as shit, but real quick, because I just want to, I want to touch back to one thing. So goblinization's in 2021.
Yes.
What happened in regards to the second strain of Vitas in 2020? Did that just kind of come, and then they just had to make another vaccine for it and revaccinize, or was there anything?
In 2020, strain 2 rears its head, and there's more damage. You lose another 10% of the world's population before they're able to get another vaccine out.
Okay, so we're just taking another chunk out of society.
Yeah, the world starts to dwindle.
Okay, that's again, once again. Fantastic. Okay.
So then this thing called goblinization starts to happen in 2021, and it's very off-putting. Before this happened, so we're in like the early 2020s maybe, people started having weird births.
Okay.
They were giving birth, women started giving birth to smaller babies that would develop hair faster.
Oh.
These are the dwarves are being born.
Hey.
At the same time, people are also starting to give birth to very elegant babies that have pointed ears. And the elves are starting to be born. Unfortunately for the people that are going to become orcs and trolls, they're not born. As magic grows into the world and mana starts rising again, anybody that had markers in their DNA where they at one point may have had troll or orc ancestry, they spontaneously start to mutate.
And that's linking back to the fourth world.
Yes.
Okay.
With elves, dwarves, trolls, and orcs.
Right. Okay.
So the orcs kind of have it a little bit easier in that people will get a little stockier and their lower jaw will extend and tusks will grow from their lower jaw.
Sick. Okay.
Which is painful. It sounds painful, right? It's like you have to go through teething all over again as an adult.
Yeah.
Okay. Metal. All right.
By far, trolls have it worse because trolls are big, imposing creatures. So people start growing to fit the troll archetype, which is on average, most trolls are like 7.5 feet tall.
Okay.
So you have people just starting to grow, and then on top of that, painful protrusions start coming out of their skulls to form horns. These dense calcium buildups start to come up on their elbows and their arms and their knees, where this calcium bone will come through their skin. It's very, very painful.
I just imagine a bunch of people out there being like, look, dear, Matthew outgrew his baby bones.
Right? A lot of people, there are some people that died from goblinization because their body couldn't handle the stress of the change.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that checks out.
That's the most unrealistic thing I've heard thus far.
A lot of people are taken to the hospital because no one has any idea what's causing this. And the people's vision start to change too, especially trolls, since trolls can see infrared, they can see thermal vision. So their vision starts to change. They just wake up in their hospital bed one day and they can see like the heat outlines around people. And it just throws them off. But this is where we see trolls and orcs making their entrance into the world, because magic is growing stronger in the world.
Sick.
And of course, because now we have elves, dwarves, orcs, and trolls, well, you see a dip in racism as we know it today.
Hooray!
Right?
Yeah.
And no caveat is attached to that statement at all.
It becomes less about the color of your skin and more about what metatype you are.
Oh
no.
There are, of course, people that hate orcs, people that hate trolls, people that hate elves, dwarves. There's an entire group that rises up out of this. They call themselves Humanist First.
Oh no.
And they are all about humans being in charge, and only humans are the pure race.
You don't say.
I don't say. And tensions definitely start to rise around this time.
I imagine so, with the humans first.
No, I'm sure everybody's super cool with it. Like, what would be the issue?
The window of time is goblinization is in 2021.
Yes.
And then in that same year, the Humanist and all that happens.
It probably takes about another year for it to really grow, but hate groups tend to pop up pretty quickly.
As soon as you give them something to hate, that's all it takes.
People don't like change, man.
That's, that is the unfortunate darkness of human nature, as it were, which, a vast majority of the population, I guess, no longer has to deal with. So,
well, the other bad part is, you have strain 2 of Vitus going around
right
around the same time, and people were worried that goblinization was an effect of that.
Oh, of course we had anti-Vitus vaxxers because we're causing goblinization because of it. Of course we do. It's gotta be.
They put it in the water, turn all the frogs into orcs.
Turn all the frogs into orcs.
Exactly.
Oh, man.
It took scientists having to come out publicly to be like, no, it's something completely different.
And people believed them?
Well, it took time.
That's the most unrealistic thing you've told me all night, so easy.
Probably.
Oh, okay. So we have goblinization. Everything goes smoothly. Society exists in a utopia. Go on.
It sadly does not.
I'm once again surprised and devastated that things don't work out smoothly.
I know. I'm sure you have
so surprised.
No idea. Then in 2023, you have riots that are growing, and these are racially motivated. So the Seattle Police Department gets tired of taking the brunt of the anger expressed in the racial riots between humans and metahumans, and they strike.
Understandable.
So they have no police force whatsoever now in the Seattle Metroplex. And so to combat this, the Seattle governor reaches out to the Lone Star State and hires Lone Star Security Services. And this is now why we have Lone Star as the main police force in our current Shadowrun play.
This because no one else wanted to do it.
Because the cops just gave up.
It's that's totally understandable.
Texas never gives up.
Never gives up on humanity, right?
Oh,
right, Tyler?
Oh,
Right? That's what you were saying, right? I'm pretty sure that's what you said. All right, so we bring in Lone Star, and then everything and then Utopia, right? That's
no,
yeah.
no, still no Utopia. No,
Son of a bitch.
we've still
Okay,
got some time.
So we brought in Lone Star.
We did bring in Lone Star, is now in Seattle. In this same year of 2023 2024, a person comes forward. He has a PhD in engineering, and he's able to demonstrate a new form of what he calls magic.
Okay.
And that he is able to enhance his body physically and do these amazing feats that people have only seen in movies or kung fu fictions.
And his name is Carl Combat Mage.
No, it's not. His name is actually Francis Daniels.
I really want Francis Daniels to be like an old-timey carnival barker. He's like, well, let me show you my feats of strength that I can accomplish here with a little use of my patented magic tonic formula that you'll not find anywhere else. It'll cure what ails you and give you the ability to leap tall buildings.
I love him and I hate him.
It's exactly as it should be. He's got the long, twisty, pencil-thin mustache, probably a top hat and a vest. Operating out of a mobile stall that he could take from town to town to sell his wares.
What's the name of that attorney that we're big fans of in Sinless? Helped out our boy Amazing.
Sam Hickory.
Is he a descendant of Sam Hickory or something?
Who knows? Maybe he could be.
Anyway, our headcanon aside.
Yeah.
You do get some mildly good news. The Metahuman Bill of Rights is passed in Texas.
Hey,
in Texas?
Texas. This bill guarantees voting privileges, equality in housing, medical care, education, and fair employment for all metahumans.
Go Texas!
I take back what I said earlier. That is the most shocking thing.
How dare you, sir? Texas is the main character of Shadowrun confirmed.
They do have all the fun toys.
Yes, we do.
So I do have a real quick, once again, a real quick wrap back around question.
Sure.
So in regards to Seattle, so Seattle is being policed by a private police force that is based from Texas.
Yes. They
are self-governed within the current system of state governance within the fifth world setup. And so
fifth to sixth world setup.
Fifth to sixth world, right? Because we're now entering into the sixth world.
Yes, once magic and really when meta-humanity starts, I mark that as the official kickoff.
Gotcha. So G-Day is the beginning of the sixth world.
Yes.
The Goblinization Day.
Yeah, Goblinization I would kick off as the start of the sixth world.
Okay, so at this point, what is like the actual like ruling system of the Seattle Metroplex area? Is it Nan in control of it, or is it because of the wall that was built? Is it not associated with the rest of Nan?
It is not associated with the rest of Nan. Think of the Seattle Metroplex kind of like East and West Berlin during the Cold War.
Gotcha. Okay. So the Seattle Metroplex
is self-governing. They're still part of the UCOS, but they're so far removed.
They're majoritively run and controlled, I'm assuming, by the mega corporations that are still located there and operating out of
a lot of mega corporations come into the Seattle Metroplex and put buildings and compounds in there because it is the only port to the Pacific that's controlled by the UCOS. And a lot of the Nan nations don't want corporations on their land.
Oh, off of the West Coast, that's not aligned to the Nan. Ah, I see. Okay.
So once the Nan is founded, no more land is sold to the corporations. They can't claim anymore. They already have what's there. So if they didn't set up,
then they're just then they're out, and that's
they're
it.
out. Yeah, and plus even then, some of these corporations, because they're not mega corporations yet, they're very close.
Right.
But a lot of these corporations will give land back to the Nan because they're afraid.
Goodwill, as if you
yes, they are afraid.
And so I apologize, because if this was something that you had already brought up, we've talked about a lot of dates and facts so far today.
Yes, we have.
So why was it that the Seattle Metroplex region was the region that was decided to not be incorporated as part of the Nan as well? Like, why did that gain sovereignty?
They wanted because the UCOS wanted a port to the west, to have something so they could still do trade with, Japan and Russia and China and everything over on that side, without it taking forever to get there.
Okay.
Like, there's still tariffs and everything. Like, the interstates still exist. It's just that you have to pay tariffs now to the Nan to transport goods across their territory.
I see. So the Seattle Metroplex was basically established as a beneficial Western port for everybody.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, for the UCOS, and the Nan allowed it because it was the one. They're getting so much land back. They're like, yeah, you can have Seattle.
Right. And I'm assuming that by having that availability as well, and that located so deep into Nan territory, that they're also going to get some type of benefit from it as well. It's not like it's just benefiting, just the UCOS and the Metroplex.
There is a place in the Seattle Metroplex called Council Island where the Salish have an embassy.
Ah, okay.
And it is that island and most of the surrounding because it's in a lake. I forget the name of the lake, but Council Island and most of the surrounding water in that lake is considered Nan territory.
Gotcha. Okay. So they have their own designated representative area within the Metroplex as well to have a presence there. But
yes,
for the sake of the Yukon and everything else, that's why it was decided to be left sovereignly to deal with the West Coast trade. Okay.
Yeah.
That all makes so much more sense now. Okay, sorry.
Okay.
That was something that I was just, like I said, I may have missed that earlier, and I apologize having to run that back real quick, but that makes sense now. Okay, back on track.
Okay. As long as that makes more sense. One of the other fun things that happens is in the Seattle Metroplex, DARPA creates the Fort Lewis Zoological Gardens. And the whole premise around this project is going to be used to explore goblinization and changes in paranormal animals, because with the resurgence of magic, creatures start coming back into the world that people thought were myths or legends.
Yeah, I mean, that checks out. A dragon has a talk show, so I can only assume that was literally just the start of it,
Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, and I'm surely there were no, experimentations on goblinized citizens against their will or anything dark and shady that happened in this place, right? Surely everything here was on the up and up.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I love to hear, a good silver lining.
All right, moving right along then.
A good silver lining in the sixth world every now and again.
Sure. Your characters could always try and go and investigate if they really wanted to.
My brethren.
Oh, geez. So now, the next major event that really happens that shakes everything up, we have the split between the northern United States and the southern United States.
Okay.
So the northern half and part of Canada come together to form the United Canadian American States, or the UCOS. And the southern states form together to form the Confederated American States, which forms the COS. Yeah, I'm sorry. Here they are, rearing their head again.
But we had like meta-human equality.
You sure
Yeah,
did.
you sure
You
did.
sure did.
Man,
You sure did.
You know,
retracting that W.
I'm glad that that explanation came up, because the entire time that we were also just talking about the Metroplex and we kept making reference to the UCOS, I didn't want to be that guy that went, and what's the UCOS again? So I'm glad that we could just slip that one in there real quick.
Yes, yeah,
It helps me save face. All right, so that is the UCOS, is the northern
Portion.
with US and Canada
Yes.
coming together. Gotcha. Okay, cool. Okay, so we have the split. Gotcha.
Yeah, you can see where the
Yeah.
split is for the UCOS and the Confederated American States.
I was just gonna say, when I was looking at this map and I saw the UCOS, I was like, "Oh, great!" And I saw Confederated American States. I'm like, "Well, maybe we'll just brush over that." I can't see how that's relevant at all.
Why what I want to know is, why does the South always have to be confederated? Why could they have not chosen like literally any other word
Hey,
to go
you
with?
know
Like,
what, man? We're consistent.
I guess so.
If anything, consistency.
Consistency is key.
Consistency is key.
Consistency keeps the
boy.
Confederacy a running.
Uh-huh.
Oh yeah.
No, took the words right out of my mouth.
All right, so we have the split. So that's the official. So okay, so other question then.
Yeah.
So prior to the split, the entirety of the COS and the UCOS were all just one landmass at that point. That what was it referred to before the split?
It was still referred to as the United States.
Okay, so we were still just the US at that point.
Yes, we were still
And-
just the US before the split.
And having the US prior to the split, but with the NAN getting all of their land back, that's where the formation of the Seattle Metroplex came from, is because that's the West Coast port
Yes,
for
for the US.
rest of the contingent United States.
Yes.
Gotcha.
And then
Okay.
arguments continued to flare after the NAN received their lands back.
Which is
and-
what brought us to the split.
Yes.
Okay.
That's what brings us to the split, is eventually the southern United States just gets tired of it and they're like, well, we're going to do this. And
Gotcha.
because remember, we've basically removed the federal government,
Right.
it was the
They-
states coming together to make the decision.
Yeah, they all just kind of went, "This cool with you? This cool with you? This cool with you?" All right.
All right,
sounds
we're good.
All right, we're good.
Okay, let's do
Now-
this.
Now, once the split occurs, is the Seattle Metroplex specifically a port to the UCOS, or is it still for both the UCOS and the COS to work out of?
That ends up being a real gray area.
I see.
I think the governor at the time, and it just maintains this way, sides with the UCOS,
Okay.
mostly because Seattle is still pretty close to what was Canadian territory, and
Right.
they're in the northern half. So
Right.
they
Okay.
just side with the UCOS. I'm sure the COS still has access to the ports that are there.
Yeah. Right. In
But
some way or form. Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
Especially since, we have Lone Star that's contracted out to them, and they are
Come
now
from the COS.
primarily from the COS.
Gotcha. Okay. So yeah, so there does have to be some type of relationship still between the Metroplex and the COS. Though
Yes.
on paper, it's primarily seen that the Metroplex is connected to the UCOS specifically.
Yes.
Cool. Gotcha. All makes sense.
Okay. As long as everything makes sense so
Yep.
far.
Yeah, no. We're doing good. This is legitimately filling in a lot of blinks for me right now, and it is,
Excellent.
it is
Well,
going good.
thus far, after everything that we've gone over, do you guys have any other questions that have come up from anything else that I've brought up?
I'm processing a lot of it. I guess like the I'm interested where the other security cores like come into play.
So those start coming into play when the corporations really start to become mega corporations.
Oh, they're not even mega corporations. They just have sovereign.
It's a bunch of corporations have sovereignty, and then through the years, as things progress, the buying out of other corporations by stronger ones ends up creating these mega corps.
Gotcha.
And I do have an entire podcast all set aside for us going into the formation of the mega corporations.
Oh, I'm excited to talk about the megacorps
and what they represent, and we'll also get into a little bit of what each one of them kind of dabbles into.
Okay.
But that is in the future. I do have that planned.
And
just
so,
know now that their formation starts to come heavily after the split.
But to tie back into what Tyler had been asking, from what I've understood of it,
Mhm.
the other private security services are all essentially subsidiaries of different megacorps.
Right. Lone Star is the only one that's uniquely their own.
Right.
Because they started
existed
so
as their
early.
own entity. Right.
Yes. The other security force that's very popular in our current timeline of playing is from the Ares Corporation. The Ares Mega Corporation has a security force they call Knight Errant. And they're a competing security force with Lone Star in the Seattle Metroplex.
But Lone Star has in and of itself like autonomy, because they exist only as the Lone Star Corporation, whereas the Knight Errant are subservient to the Ares Corporation.
Right. But
Gotcha.
Ares Corporation still has Knight Errant try to bid for security contracts in the Metroplex.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
So you've got Lone Star policing most of the Seattle Metroplex, but there are some areas where you're more likely to run into Knight Errant instead of Lone Star.
Gotcha. Okay, cool.
And those are the only two major security forces. None of the other mega corporations that come about really jump in to police forcing. They'll have their own private like specialized units that they don't try and loan out to the city.
Corporate strike teams, but not for hire, as it were.
Basically.
Yeah. Okay.
And like I said, we'll get into that more when we start jumping into the mega corporations.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Knight Errant Security Services. No one ever wants to be a victim. No one ever thinks it can happen to them. Today, however, we live in a dangerous world where every time you step outside, you could become the victim of a violent crime. Fortunately, you can shield yourself, your family, loved ones, and your property proactively with one call to Knight Errant Security Services. Let Knight Errant be your bulwark against evil in this dangerous world. Give your family the peace of mind they deserve and protect your property against all manner of damage and intrusions. Call 1-800-555-ARES for a free, no-obligation quote from one of our helpful representatives. Our operators are standing by. Knight Errant is a subsidiary of Ares Macro Technology.